We are continuing with our same subtitle. It's the Compromise of 1850. So remember, Clay makes this compromise the last compromise crafted by the great compromiser, and he asks the North to kind of give up a little bit more than the South, to kind of pacify the South and keep them from seceding, because they are seriously threatening to secede yet again if slavery is not made safe forever. So the 5 parts of the Compromise of 1850. First, is the Fugitive Slave Act. A Fugitive Slave Act had been in effect in America for quite a while. This says that runaway slaves should be returned to their masters. This includes in the North. So if a slave would flee to the North and the master would request that slave be returned, the North was supposed to do that. And they actually create the U.S. Marshal Service to enforce this law. This is very unpopular in the North because the North is more sympathetic to the slaves, and if they run to the North, then they don't really want to have to return them to the South. That seems cruel to the North. So this is incredibly unpopular and angered a lot of people who have been previously neutral about this issue. This is also one of the main things that kills the Whig Party. We'll get to that in just a second. Part 2, California joins as a free state. So it does allow the rather populous state of California to join. And this kind of tips the balance between slave and free states, but there are more things to come. So all of the territories now will decide by popular sovereignty. This is specifically referencing New Mexico and Utah. So popular sovereignty means that they'll decide by a popular vote. And this is a very tense issue. Some people are in favor of this because then the people get to decide. Lincoln in particular is against this because he thinks that either slavery is right or wrong. If it's wrong, though, you shouldn't let people decide that it's okay just by a vote. So this isn't a really popular solution for a lot of people in the North, but it is for more moderates who want to keep the Union together at any cost. Fourth is the slave trade abolished in D.C. So a lot of people actually wanted slavery abolished entirely in D.C. because it was controlled by Congress, and so Congress did have the jurisdiction to abolish slavery there. So this is a compromise. The slave trade is abolished, as in you can't bring any slaves into D.C., you can't even exhibit people in chains, but does not fully abolish slavery. And Texas is supposed to give up the New Mexico territory. So, the results of the Compromise of 1850. The Whig Party dies after the Compromise of 1850. And a lot of this is because of the issue of slavery itself. So the Whig Party doesn't really want to take a stance on whether slavery is good or bad. And so a lot of people start to look for a better option that's going to take a stronger stance on the main issue of the day, which is slavery. The North and South are strongly splitting over slavery. So the parties that kind of spanned both the North and the South are going to split in favor of parties that are pretty much only in the North or the South. So the death of the Whig Party, and along with it, 2 of its leaders die, Clay and Webster, in 1852. The death of the Whig Party paves the way for the birth of the Republican Party in 1854, which will eventually be the party that Lincoln runs under when he's elected president. So also, as part of the Compromise of 1850, technically secession is avoided, but it is barely avoided. And this is kind of a band-aid over a gaping wound. Like, this issue is not going to go away, but they're still trying to avoid going to full-out civil war. Of course, we know that they're going to end up going to war anyway, but this is yet another attempt to keep that split from happening as the South gets more and more radical and the North goes more and more against slavery. So on our next slide, you'll find a very important map that shows the split between slave and free states and which states get to decide after the Compromise of 1850. So check that out, and that'll be the end of our notes today. Don't forget to do the rest of your pod for